بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله جزاكم الله خير Ibrahim, and thank you to everyone who chose to join us this evening for this event. So I just want to share some words Ibrahim said, kind of speaking a little bit about why or what the background to this event is, to the topic at least anyway, Dawud alayhi salam. Our main speaker, Tariq Ramadan, will be speaking about his story in particular in a short while. But it's important that we understand how is it that the children of Israel got to where they were with his story. What is the backdrop to that? And why that's important, because often we tend to, even in our daily lives, conceive of time as being a linear process, that time is a straight line, it just goes on, and it's going to go on until whenever it ends. But actually, history is cyclical. It goes around in cycles of justice, injustice, oppression, coming out of that period, coming into new periods. And the Quran mentions this in many ways, in many different occasions. And even in terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking in the Quran about how, these are just not stories, they're lessons for us to learn from, that the experiences of the people of the past, of the prophets, of the different people and what they went through, they don't just become stories in our lives, they become direct guidance for us to reflect on. And I'm going to start with the specific verse in Surah Qasas. And I find this verse remarkable actually, at least in the context of our work at Cage. Because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes is Pharaoh's oppression of the children of Israel. And how does he describe it? He doesn't just say Pharaoh oppressed the Jews, that Pharaoh oppressed the children of Israel. What he does is he describes the methodology by which Pharaoh does this. So the verse specifically says that Pharaoh split apart Egyptian society into small pieces. And after that kind of systematic dividing had finished, he then oppressed the children of Israel by killing their children and enslaving their women. And I find this remarkable because anybody who knows anything about history, has read anything of especially kind of the British period of colonialism or the whole of European colonialism, they'll know that divide and conquer is a classic tactic, that it's used in order to do what? In order to micromanage society so that you can oppress groups one at a time. It's a brilliant way of making sure that actually no effective resistance can ever form, because you've managed to split society apart into small pieces. And this is exactly what happened to the Jews of Pharaoh that were living at Pharaoh's time, the Jews of Moses, Bani Israel. That Allah describes that Pharaoh split them apart and then they were oppressed. And what happened to them after that? And then Moses goes into this confrontation, he helps emancipate them, a story that we celebrate. We fast. We fast one day of the year out of what? Out of recognition of how happy we as Muslims are that Bani Israel, the children of Israel, were freed from the oppression of Pharaoh. It's part of our story. It's a remarkable thing actually that it means so much to us that we fast that day in order to remember it. But then the children of Israel, they finally come into freedom, right? Most of you will be familiar with the story, so I'm not going to go through all the little details. But they find their freedom finally. And they're in that freedom. They're with Moses, with Musa alayhi salam, and God says to them, now enter Palestine and reclaim this land as your own. And the Quranic story, and I accept that there are different stories in different ways, that might change the details a little bit, but the way that the Quran tells this story is that the children of Israel, who had just come out of Pharaoh's oppression, they refuse. They say to Moses, you go with your Lord and you go and reclaim Palestine. We're staying right here. We're safe here right now. We can't even conceive of going in there. And so what does Allah do? Allah bans the children of Israel from entering Palestine for a 40-year period. He says, okay, No, you're not allowed now. You have to wait 40 years. And in that time period, Moses dies, Musa alayhi salam passes away, and a whole new generation is born under the tutelage of Yusha bin Nun, the next prophet that came after Musa. And it's remarkable that the scholars say about this 40-year period. Why? They ask the question, why 40 years? Because it takes 40 years for a new generation to be born and to be raised in freedom, to not have the yoke of oppression confusing their minds so that they're not able to conceive of what it means to gain freedom with your own hands, to live the freedom and then to fight for it, to have it. For that early generation who had lived under the slavery of Pharaoh for so long, their minds were so colonized by that slavery, by that torture, by their abuse, they weren't able to conceive of a life outside of that. And when we consider actually in some ways our situation here in the UK, many of our parents' generation, the first generation to come here, many of them had seen colonialism with their own eyes. They had lived under the Raj. They knew what it meant to have a repressive power structure, putting your life under difficulty every single day. So when they came over here, they very much carried the difficulties of that period and that kind of relationship structure. But then, of course, we were born, those in the second generation. And what did we do? We said, sorry, but we've been educated in the same schools as these guys. We've gone to the same universities as them. We've had exactly the same experiences. We don't feel inferior in any way. And it's this generation that's here right now, the people who have attended this event and outside of it, who are now finally able to say that we are equal partners in this conversation. We're not just people who are going to allow ourselves to be killed, maimed, and abused, and to be treated however you like. You cannot just simply change your entire systems in order to otherize us. So if we reflect once again on the modality of Pharaoh's oppression, which was disunity, right? It's actually very reflective of what Muslims believe as to be a very kind of satanic approach to harming Muslims. One of the things that Muslims believe in is that we believe that the most beloved act to Iblis, to Satan, to the devil, is one of his devils who goes and he constantly stays at a man and a woman each night, a husband and a wife, until he gets them to split from one another. And the narration says the devil says that you are the chosen one, you are the right person for me. From a theoretical perspective, let's just say that that's about marriage, but if we widen that and say, what is his intention here? His intention is to divide, to disunite, to destroy, to split just individuals, families, communities, organizations, entire societies apart from one another, because it's in that division that actually people are able to be repressed, to be harmed, to be abused. And so what is the panacea to that? And inshallah, I'll end with these comments, that the panacea to division is unity. It's to reverse that trend, to reverse that process. And that is what we now have to come to do. Some people talk about intersectionality, that we need to mix with other groups, with other people, come together in order to do what? In order to resist against oppression. And this is what CAGE stands for. We see the war on terror as a construct, as being structurally racist, as being structurally xenophobic. And if we don't understand how that policy affects us at a societal level, then we are doomed. If we can't come together to say, actually, the secret evidence for anybody against anyone is completely and utterly wrong. Whether it's your best friend or if it's somebody you hate. People used to say to us, why do you represent Abu Qatada? We said, because just look at the way that his case is managed. He has to fight his deportation under secret evidence. We don't care what he said or what he's done in the past in relation to his case. You have to represent his interests. So we have to unite amongst ourselves. Last year we had Abu Qatada live streaming about his experience from Jordan. And this year we have Professor Tariq Ramadan speaking with us. Let's come together. Let's come together, not just stay in one camp and only talk amongst ourselves. Ta'awun, cooperation, ta'awun ala bir wa taqwa, isn't just with your own jama'ah, it's not just with your own group. How can you make cooperation with the people you already agree with in the first place? It doesn't make sense. To make genuine ta'awun, to genuinely cooperate with other groups, is to step outside of your comfort zone and to say, look, we don't necessarily agree on everything, but we can agree on this, that oppression against anybody is wrong, and we should stand together. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.